Good evening. Before I begin, I'd like to personally thank each of our candidates for your desire and willingness to serve the community of Holly Springs. Marriage brought me to Holly Springs in 1990. My late wife's family traces its roots here on Avent Ferry Road, back several generations. We live in the ETJ, and so I'm ineligible to vote for any of you in this election. Therefore, I'm depending on the citizens of Holly Springs, especially the people seated behind me, to select the best candidate with the wisdom, foresight, and temperament needed to lead us as we meet the challenges of our growing future. As much as you want to represent them, they will represent me. So I would also like to personally thank everyone who's attending tonight. Let's quickly review the format. Candidates' names will be drawn at random, and each candidate will be given 1 minute to introduce themselves and provide 1 or 2 reasons why they love Holly Springs. The candidates will then be given 2 minutes to respond to each question, which will be drawn at random, with no opportunity for rebuttals. At the conclusion of the forum, candidates will also be given 2 minutes to make any closing remarks they would like to make. The questions for the candidates were acquired prior to the forum through an electronic survey sent to Holly Springs Chamber members. The questions were not made available to the candidates, or myself for that matter, ahead of tonight's events. We are all hearing them for the first time. As with the order of the candidate responses, tonight's questions will be randomly drawn. I will present the question and start the timer when you begin your response. A tone will signal the end of your allotted time, and you will be expected to stop with the tone. The topics to be covered in this forum will be growth and traffic, downtown development, business climate, and community engagement. I'd like to remind our citizens that tonight's event is not a debate, but it is a candidates forum. A forum is defined as a place, meeting, or medium where ideas and views on a particular issue can be exchanged. With that being said, now let's go to our candidates and learn about their views and ideas for the future of Holly Springs. So this is the segment where I will give each of you 1 minute to introduce yourself and tell us why you love Holly Springs. Your names will be drawn at random from here. I'll make sure I stick it over my head so you know I'm not just kind of favoring people with similar hairstyles. And I have I'll turn this over, I'll turn this around. When you start talking, I'll hit the start button, and you hear a nice little tone at the end. You'll see a little red mark going around, kind of giving you an idea of how much time you have left. So, candidates, are you ready?
Yep. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Sean.
Good evening, neighbors of Holly Springs. I'm Sean McGrath, and currently serve you as the chairman of the town's planning board. While now in my second term on the board, our family moved to Holly Springs just 5 years ago after I'd retired from serving our nation as a colonel and fighter pilot in the United States Air Force for nearly 25 years. The best part of Holly Springs is that it is truly a unique place we now get to call home. After 15 prior moves, my wife Lori of 27 years and our 2 daughters found a place that is as diverse, friendly, and connected to match our experiences from moving around the world in places like South Korea, Germany, and Japan. We now have neighbors in Wood Creek from India, Ghana, China, raised locally, and families from many states. It is that diversity, the great amenities Holly Springs already offers, the natural beauty of this area, combined with our town's drive to continue on a path to keep us safe and connected to each other, that reminds us daily we made the right choice. Because of that, I'm running to serve you in a broader capacity on the council to address the challenges by finding opportunities to set policy that affect positive change.
Thank you.
Good time.
I mean, they all went to the other side. I didn't see them. Sherry.
Good evening. I'm Sherry Lee. It is wonderful to look out and see so many familiar faces. So thank you so much for coming here. tonight. I have lived in Holly Springs for 15 years. I have four children that have, actually I have 5 children that have gone through or going through the schools here in Holly Springs, 4 that still live at home. And I've been on the Holly Springs Town Council for 8 years. I've been blessed enough to be part of a few different councils. From when, in 2011, when Holly Springs was just growing, exploding, you might say. And very, very excited about that, to the point where we're getting a little bit like, whoa, a little bit overwhelmed, to become victims of our successes, you might say. I have had the honor of serving with some incredible council people, and I continue to do so. So the reason I would like to stay on the council is to move forward with the experience.
I'm cruel, guys.
No, it's all right. Hey, we do it at public comment all the time.
Tim's holding to the line.
This coming from a guy who can't shut his mouth. Okay, whoops. This will be Erin.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for the Chamber for putting this on. It's a great resource for our citizens. My name is Erin Wolf. I live right at the end of Grigsby Road, right by Sugg Farm, with my wife and my 2 young children. Together, we own an animal hospital in Garner, and even though we were lucky enough to find a business to purchase there, we really wanted to make our home in Holly Springs. This is where we wanted to raise our kids. And what drew us here was the same things that I love about living here, which is, first and foremost, the people and the sense of community. It really is heads and tails above everybody else. And that's something that we need to work diligently to preserve. And as we move into the next phase of what Holly Springs becomes, that sense of community is something we need to double down on. And the other things that make us special, our beautiful natural areas, our great small business community, the things that make us special should guide our growth, and that's why I'm running for town council. So thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Garrett.
Good evening. I'm Garrett Raziq. My favorite thing about Holly Springs is the people. At the end of the day, we may talk about growth and development, but it always comes down to what makes us special. People. People like Mr. Andrew, a member of Holly Springs' historic African American community who finds himself being displaced by the 540 extension. People like Darlene, who due to an increase in traffic coming through her neighborhood, worries about the safety of children. People like Josh, who wakes up hoping that he can get in a morning run without smelling that landfill. People like Violetta, who knows her commute will only be any longer as more people come to town. People like Martin, who finds himself moving the Fuquay due to a lack of affordable housing options. People like Patricia, who wants more environmental protection so we can preserve the beauty of our natural area. As a father, I've always advocated to ensure that my children will live a happy, healthy, purposeful life. I'm seeking to be a member of our town council because I believe that if I want this for my own children, I should also want it for your children, your grandchildren, and for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tom?
Good evening, and thank you for everyone that came here tonight. And I want to thank the Chamber for putting on this event. My name is Tom O'Brien, and I am your town councilman. 13 years ago, I moved my family from New Jersey, my kids, my wife Bonnie, to a little town called Holly Springs. And since day one, since I've been in Holly Springs, I have been an asset, a volunteer with our Parks and Rec department. For 14 years, I've been a coach, donating my time. I've also sit on the Technical Review Committee, as well as the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. And what the passion that brings to me, to the town that is such a fantastic place, is the community getting together when we have issues. Lastly, I serve on the Meg Smile Foundation Board, which helps kids which are going through a difficult time. I love Holly Springs. I want to continue the good work that we're going today and moving to the future for tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. We'll now go through the questions. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer the same question. But I'm going to I have not seen these. They've all been folded, presented to me this way, so bring the first one out. Give me a second to read it. Okay, the question is, what is the number one thing that you would turn around in Holly Springs? What is the number one thing that you would turn around in Holly Springs? And we'll begin with Erin.
Turn around is such a loaded word. I don't think we need to turn around anything necessarily. I think things in Holly Springs are going well, but there are some adjustments that definitely need to be made. Talking to folks who have been here much longer than me about where Holly Springs was 10 to 15 years ago, the type of growth that we've had here was needed, where you had to go other places to get things that you needed if you were living here, and now we don't. Everything you could possibly want, we now have in town. But because of that, we can now start rethinking the way we're growing. Instead of making sure we have those rooftops, to make sure we have the people, to make sure we're getting all the retail and stores and offices that we want, we can start being much more thoughtful and purposeful with the way we grow. That way we'll meet the demand for housing because this is a wonderful place to live and the secret is out and more people are going to come. We should welcome them. We should not slow our growth or say no growth because it's not good for our town and it's not good for our community. But we should grow in a more thoughtful, purposeful way so that those negative impacts that we have from growth, the traffic, the overcrowding of schools that are shifting our kids around, the rising cost of living, the lack of housing affordability, these are things that can be addressed. And so as we move into the next phase of what Holly Springs is going to become, maybe we rethink the way we grow from here moving forward.
Thank you, Erin. Again, what is the number one thing you would turn around in Holly Springs? Sean.
Thank you. As I had the opportunity to lead other organizations in my previous time, I'd walk into an organization and realize right up front that the last thing you want to do is try and turn things around right away. You need to take some time to look at how things are going and then decide which course corrections need to be made in that organization or how you're planning on doing things in the future. And all of that becomes a very deliberative process. So that's something that I learned throughout my time. That's part of the reason that I tried to become engaged in our town when we first moved here and have continued to do so on our planning board and have seen the things that go on inside the town and how we are continuing to measure and monitor our growth as we move along. What I have noted over those last 3 years being on the planning board is that like any rapid growth organization, you don't necessarily look at the strategic outlook and look at that traffic, in this case, as that growth occurs. And so there are areas certainly in the town, if you look at what's funded right now on North Carolina's long distance planning and funded projects, there's only 2 of them in Holly Springs. So it's going to take continual engagement, bringing people and ideas together to partner with not only NCDOT, but surrounding communities so that we can catch back up to some of that infrastructure that causes people that consternation in traffic day in and day out. Whether that's those grade elevated or grade separated exchanges over NC 55 so that traffic can smooth flow through our town, since a good portion of that traffic is coming from other locations and commuting to somewhere else, we have to do something to mitigate that. That takes strategic forethought. It takes some time to change that direction. I'm not saying we need to turn it around, but we definitely need to put enhanced effort and engagement in partnering to make those things change for our town so that the traffic does flow better for a lot of those challenges that our residents face today. Thank you.
Thank you. What is the number one thing you would turn around in Holly Springs? Tom.
Previous administrations, our mayor that's here today has fought with the landfill. It has been a challenge for most recently in the last 6 months. I wish the landfill was never here. It's gotten worse, but I can tell you as your voice, it's my job to represent you. So back in May, I went to the county commissioners in a meeting downtown Raleigh to ask for innovative ways to reduce the smell and odor that was occurring, hitting residents in that area. It's impacting people that are at Ting Park, Oak Hall, Arbor Creek. The residents, we hear your voice, and it's my responsibility to reach out to them. About a month ago, we invited our County Commissioner Matt Calabria, as well as David Ellis, the county manager, to come to Town Hall to address these issues. And, back in May, I didn't think they heard our voice. I think they heard our voice a month ago. This past Tuesday, or this past week, I attended a meeting, a workshop downtown for the county commissioners, that they were looking at this as a problem. With the help of Councilwoman Kelly and our mayor, I believe they heard our voice. They are going to try to provide different solutions to address the smell. That for sure is one thing I would love to have turned around, but I know that in the past, our mayor had fought this, the people had fought this, but now it's becoming a major issue. And that's one thing that I'm going to work on for the next 4 years if I'm elected. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Sherry, what is the number one thing you would turn around in Holly Springs?
Well, I think I've had, as being on the council for 8 years, I've seen a lot of the changes. And one thing that has significantly changed is the dynamic of Holly Springs. From, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, I think, when I moved here, now up to 39,000 people, our dynamic has changed. So one thing that I wished I had done as a council, or as the council and the town had done, is our strategic plan. We just created developed a new strategic plan that is going to guide us in the future. I wish we had addressed this a few years back. That strategic plan is going to help not only with our future development and growth in ways that where we can say to a developer who wants to come in and put 600 homes on a certain amount of acreage, we say, well, does this meet our strategic plan? Does it meet our land use vision? There are different things there now that we have these new guidelines for the new dynamics of our town to help us move forward. Also, along with that strategic plan are things like safety. We're one of the safest towns, not only in North Carolina, but in the United States. We need to be able to continue that. Also, one of the things we have on there is working more, and I wish I had done this a lot sooner, working more with the municipalities around us. We're slowly all coming together. And if we can start, for instance, building a senior center that we could work with Fuquay, or partnering with Apex as traffic is going to increase, as Viridia or Carolina Springs comes forward. Things like that I wish I had done before. So a little bit more collaboration, a little bit more of the strategic plan being done sooner. But what's in the past is in the past, and now moving forward, we have those things rolling. We know how to use them. I know where we came from, as I think all of you do too, many of you, so that's where I want to focus.
Thank you. Garrett?
So you're going to make us pick. With 2 children, I know you can never only get one of something. So picking between affordability and environmental protection, I'm going to go with affordability right now. So one thing I want to increasingly address is that we see trends where it's becoming increasingly unaffordable for particular groups within this town to live here or to move here. I think of people on fixed income who increasingly seeing healthcare costs rise, housing costs rise. I think of those who work for our town, who commute in from Harnett County because they don't have the incomes they need to live here. I think about teachers who work in our schools, school support staff, those who work in our shops, our restaurants. 87% of those who work in Holly Springs commute in. I think about these individuals. I think about the individuals who are here just getting started out. So what do? We see that home values are increasing rapidly, sometimes 25 to 50% increase in the past 7 years. We see that there's a mismatch in housing. The statistic I recently saw is that 89% of housing units in Holly Springs are 3+ bedroom, but only 62% of households are 3 or more people. We also see that we're losing affordable housing. The supply is incredibly low. We see 1 to 2 month turnover in that supply. And we see developers, I literally talked to someone who said that developers contact them 3 to 4 times per week hoping to buy their home. I think about these people, and I think about what we need to do. So we need to diversify our housing stock, think about cottages, duplexes, triplexes to keep that small town feel still. We need to look into doing creative things, working with nonprofits that help low-income and elderly residents stay in their homes by doing upgrades to those homes. We need to work with large developers with land donations and potentially manage those land donations, hand them to a nonprofit so that those rents or those home prices can stay stable over time. Those communities can be 55+ communities where those on fixed incomes can still live here over time. So I'll work on affordability at the end of the day.
Thank you. With the town's current funding level, how would you prioritize spending? Again, with the town's current funding level, how would you prioritize spending? And let's begin with Sean.
Thank you. Funding and budget levels, always an interesting conversation. As I look at where our town is today, much like one of the challenges I had, my last challenge I had in my Air Force career, starting to build a mini desert or a mini city in the desert in the Middle East. What's the first and foremost thing? The first and foremost thing in Maslow's hierarchy is always safety and security. So if safety and security cannot be taken place and we continue the safety and security of our community, then all else is kind of immaterial. Doesn't matter if you have food on the table or a place to live if you don't have the safety and security for your residents. So that's first and foremost for any budgeting cycle. So our first responders, our first offenders that happen to be out there, we need to make sure that they're here and they have the benefits they need to be able to sustain themselves in this society, in our neighborhood. Beyond that, we all have to get places. So once you're safe and secure, you've got to be able to get places to do what you need to do. As we've already heard, and I believe Garrett mentioned, 87% commute in, 90% commute out to another opportunity or where they work so that they can put food on their table and provide for their family. So transportation, I think, falls number 2 in that budgeting cycle and how we do that. And we have to integrate with other partners, whether that's NCDOT, federal funding, our partners in other surrounding municipalities and counties, to make sure that as we need things and we look at areas such as the 751 coastal bypass, that we are going to have to partner with other people if we want another outlet south of our community to take some of that outlet flow off of NC 55. So those are the top 2, and then we have to go further so that we can connect our community through Parks and Rec so that we can make sure that people have an opportunity to get all the great amenities that we have here in Holly Springs and enjoy those when they have their time off, so we can be a live, work, and play society.
Thank you. Tom.
Today, our town, our budget is about over $60 million. We have a little over 300 employees. And just like Sean had stated, police and fire would be our number 1 priority to make sure that they have all the necessary resources as we continue to grow. We're approaching 39,000 at this time. The town has designated a 5-year capital improvement plans, and one of them, if you may not know or had a chance to go see, is our Department of Public Works. Our facility there right now is so tight. It's incredibly challenging for our folks who do a fantastic job servicing the residents of Holly Springs. And that improvement here we are working on as we speak so that we're prepared to handle 45,000. As we move forward with our infrastructure, we've teamed with the DOT to widen Avon Ferry Road. We have a transportation bond that was approved by the voters. It's a $40 million transportation bond, and we've already identified 2 key areas. One, Holly Springs Road from Main Street all the way to Sunset Lake. If you all driven down that street on a snowstorm or heavy rains, a couple of years ago, we had cars parked on the side of the road and emergency vehicles couldn't get through. So we have identified that as a trouble point. The other one is we're in the process of widening on 55 from Avon Ferry to Main Street. So we're starting to use our infrastructure, the money here to help the infrastructure that's necessary as we continue to grow. And that's what's going to take is infrastructure going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry? Let me repeat the question because it's been a while. With the town's current funding level, how would you prioritize spending?
Well, I think that one of the number one things, as a lot of us have spoken about, is safety. And I think we're moving in the right direction for funding. Although I will agree with Garrett on the workforce housing. That's a different day. So my next thing would be our transportation and our road improvements. I will be honest with you, I did not vote for the transportation bond. Not because I didn't think we need it, because we do, but because of the tax increase. I knew it was coming from the county. But then I saw that the people wanted this bond, and they knew the tax increase came with it, so I did vote to approve that, and I'm glad I did. It is something that's very needed. What I would like to see going forward when it comes to transportation is something that we've just started talking about, and that is getting to, we are in a very healthy fiscal position right now in town, but to get healthier so that we may be able to win a grant from the DOT, an 80-20 grant, where the DOT says, you need to widen this road, all right, we'll give you 80%, you pay 20. But then we're at their mercy. We have to wait for their schedule, wait for the money, things like that. I would like to see us at a point where we can put that money up front to get the transportation, those roads done, and then be reimbursed. Things will get done faster. There's less rules on who we can use to do some of this work, so we'd be in charge. So that's one of the things I'd really like to see us do. I'd also financially like to work on our tax base, getting our business, the residential to business ratio 70-30. I believe we're, let's see, I think Councilman O'Brien said it best in a podcast, 83.
17.
83-17. So if we have a higher business tax base, there's a lot of things that could be fixed with that. So
Thank you.
That's that.
Garrett?
So when I think about prioritizing spending, I always connect it to my ultimate goal of building a community where folks can live a happy, healthy, purposeful life. So there's a lot of things that falls under that umbrella. Because I think we often talk with all the growth about traffic, and it's certainly an issue that needs to be addressed, and that needs to be a priority in terms of working with those who help match funds for road widenings and improvements, and also particularly connectivity on the west side of town. But when I think about, I like to expand that conversation when we talk about growth and development and addressing it with our budget. I think about traffic, but I also think about impacts on local economy, housing, air quality, water quality, stormwater management, deforestation, speeding through neighborhoods, broken community ties when those have lived here for a long time are used to that small town living, crowded schools, and island communities that don't have the connectivity needed. Now, a lot of what I mentioned here is stuff that's funded by the state or the county, and that we need to work with them and get creative. Say, for schools, we could do things like zone land for a school or buy land and donate it to the county so we can deal with the crowded schools. I already offered the suggestion on affordability. What we can do is we can actually work with large developments, kind of like one like Carolina Springs that is coming in, to not only donate land for a fire station and a park, but also one in which we can take that land, turn it over to a nonprofit, and that nonprofit can then use it to be a affordable community in perpetuity, so that those who don't have that affordability can still live there. And so my priorities will always go back to creating a more happy, healthy, purposeful community for individuals.
Thank you. Erin, with the town's current funding level, how would you prioritize spending?
Well, it's a good thing this isn't a debate because I agree with most of what's been said so far, but I'll bring a slightly different perspective. As a small business owner, this is a decision that my wife and I have to make on a daily basis, working within a narrow budget. And when we are deciding where are we going to invest our money, how are we going to spend our revenue, we think about return on investment. What is going to grow our business? What is going to do the best for our company? And the thing we most invest in our business is our people. We are sitting up here under these deceptively hot lights, but the town staff are the heroes who are doing the bulk of the work to make sure that Holly Springs is the wonderful place to live that it is. By investing more in our staff, by widening our staff, we're going to be remaining an employer of choice, which I know is a priority of the council. We're going to attract the best and the brightest employees, and the entire town is going to benefit from that. I also agree with Sherry that we need to make that initial investment to better balance our tax revenue base. The reason we have to have voter-approved bonds is because we are relying on residents to cover the cost of our infrastructure. In Garner, where my business is, that same tax revenue split is about 45-55, and their taxes reflect that. So we can do things like public-private partnerships, like we've done with Town Hall Commons, where the town is investing in some infrastructure, finding developers that are going to revitalize an area, that's going to bring in a return. And for larger companies, we can put some money into developing some of our business sites. I talked to a economic development lawyer, and he said, all you need to do for some of these sites is build a shell building. Something that when you show it to clients, you have that infrastructure there, they can see it, and they can move in right away. That's going to get the biggest return and the biggest bang for our buck.
Thank you. I almost made an executive decision to pass this one because I think we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but since I drew the question, I will ask it. What considerations would you give to fostering small businesses during the land planning process and development process? What considerations would you give to fostering small businesses during the land planning and development process? Garrett.
All right, so I'm going to expand this a little. I want to recognize first the value that small businesses provide. I mean, they allocate 3 times more money into local economy compared to larger businesses. They create community ties. And so while we need to value and acknowledge small businesses, we also must acknowledge how difficult it is to start and keep a small business in operation. So how are we going to address this? We could do something on the getting them here, particularly on this planning side. What can we do to make sure they're set up and ready to start? I think we need to work more with the Chamber of Commerce and the Launch Holly Springs program to make sure that they have the resources they need to draft their business plan, market analysis, and also access to capital for sure. We must also address regulations that unfairly disadvantage small businesses, things like parking and sidewalk installation requirements. So when you look at things like fee waivers. Now that's getting them here. So I'm going to expand a little and say, how do we keep them here? Because only about 25% of small businesses make it to 15 years or more. So what can we do? Small businesses thrive on foot traffic. So in the planning process, we can make sure that going forward, we pair small businesses with mixed-use residential neighborhoods to get that foot traffic. We increase connectivity throughout the community so more folks can get to those small businesses, invest in public transportation to not only get folks within the community shopping there, but those outside to come here, particularly in our downtown. And we also need to get creative around things like when an owner, we see this all the time in other communities, when an owner wants to move on or retire, that small business can get lost. So what can we do? We can get creative and partner with nonprofits. There's a nonprofit called Project Equity that actually provides the capital so that employees of small businesses can actually purchase that small business when that owner's ready to retire or move on, thus keeping their jobs and also keeping that small business within our community and keeping those ties that we so much value. So I think we need to not only get them here, but keep them here in that process.
Thank you. Erin.
Oh, this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart as a small business owner. It's something I think about a lot because one day I would love to have a small business here in Holly Springs, if simply for the commute. But a couple things that we can do. One, as Garrett said, building spaces for small businesses is key. Having that walkability, having that drive-by traffic, smaller, more affordable spaces for them to rent. Affordability for small businesses starting here is an issue, so building for small businesses would be important. The other thing is expanding incentives. So right now we have downtown development incentives where the town will give or split infrastructure costs up to $25,000. They'll fast track permitting and waive certain fees. For a large business, $25,000 is a drop in a bucket, but for a small business applying for a loan, $25,000 can make or break that loan. So expanding that throughout town so we have small business growth in other areas of the town, I think would be super important. The other issue is I talk to small business owners here all the time. I have several in my neighborhood. And when they're opening small businesses, I ask them, well, how was it dealing with the town? And to a man or a woman, they say, it's been great. And I say, well, who did you deal with? And each of them give me a different person. I said, well, how did you get in touch with them? And they said, we called the town. This is who answered the phone. They were super helpful and they guided us every step of the way, which is great. But we can consolidate that, streamline it, create a small business department within economic development, not spending money to do so, just consolidating everything into one place so small businesses know where to go for their resources, know where to go for permitting questions, know where to go when they need questions about incentives. A month trying to get through a permitting process can make or break the opening of a business. That's a month worth of lease time on the rental space or on the mortgage payment that they won't get back. So these are little tiny things that for larger businesses wouldn't make much of a difference, but can be the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful small business.
Thank you. Sherry.
All right, I don't need the question. I think I've got it. Has anybody in here seen the new show Undercover Billionaire? Did anybody watch that? Basically, real quick, it's a billionaire goes undercover into a small town or medium-sized town and tries to build $1 million business from the ground up, starting with nothing. They've had one season. It was successful, pretty much. And what I took from that is using the community. He used the community. He used the resources in and right around that community to build that business. Took people whose businesses maybe were struggling or had a business before and couldn't afford to keep it open. He took them and used their talents and what they had to grow that. So that is one thing I think that we should try to encourage. Launch Holly Springs, an incredible, incredible program for entrepreneurs who are struggling to open that business, whether it's financially or just physically, mentally. I think that's great. We need to continue to encourage that or even help them to grow. Marketing. I bet more than half the people in this room are familiar, I'm sure, with Ladies of Holly Springs. I know we've heard good and bad about it, but it's a great marketing tool. You know, encouraging people to use our small businesses that are here now, you know, to go to them, to patronize them. Going once a month isn't going to keep them in business. If you can't go, tell your neighbor, you know, recommend them. And last, being site ready. That's where the town needs to come in handy, to have some sites ready for these small businesses to go into, to partner with, or to help them to partner with others.
Thank you. Tom.
The Chamber of Commerce is pretty active in our town today with over 300 members, and that's where it starts. The town also partners with the Chamber of Commerce, and if you look at our downtown, it's all small to mid-sized businesses in the downtown. With a private-public partnership that we did, we spent money for the infrastructure. So the parking decks, the sidewalks there, working together to bring something special to downtown is what we're doing. When I look at the smaller businesses out there, you guys have some great ideas here, but our chamber is critical. These folks help these businesses that want to get off the ground to identify opportunities where they can start their business, where they can grow their business today. As the town, we would love the opportunity to continue the growth in the downtown district. You all have seen Town Hall Commons. The block is coming. So we've got a great opportunity to make the downtown a special place, a special destination to come and enjoy. And that has to do with all of the small businesses that will be partaking there. So the town, the public-private partnership, we built the foundation for those types of business to come in, and I'm excited as we continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, what considerations would you give to fostering small businesses during the land planning and development process?
Great. Well, I'll look at this from a slightly different perspective. So if you have a large base of an operation, when that operation starts up, it brings in all kinds of other small supporting businesses to run that operation. When that base disappears or the airplanes go away from it, so do all those small subsidiaries. So I would look at it from this perspective. We have large developments coming in right now, such as the hospital, such as Carolina Springs, and we need to leverage those opportunities right there, because those big business opportunities will drive and bring in other folks who want to start complementary small businesses that go along with those big businesses. Whether it's an Iceplex, if that matures in Carolina Springs, the hospital itself is going to bring a bunch of subsidiary medical facilities into Holly Springs that are small business related. And they hopefully can, in partnership with the chamber and with our town, have some of those developed facilities so that some of those fees are offset. It makes it easier for them to access that small business that's also a need for those big businesses that are there. So it's never, these situations and problems are never simple in nature. They're complex. They're all interwoven. So I think it's an interwoven perspective. You look at what's going on with Town Hall Commons. 90% occupancy are already rented out. And you look at some of the historic homes that are going to thrive around there that have now turned into businesses, such as the Griffiths doing the Pimento Tea Room, or that Our Moments in Time right across the street. It's a great opportunity to not only bring that big business in that brings in greater amounts of labor force to get us to that tax basis we're looking for, but it also brings in those subsidiary small business entities that help that big business thrive and continue for our neighbors and community as we move forward.
Thank you. Love the suspense.
How many are in there?
How do you propose to hold developers accountable for the traffic and basic infrastructure? I'll repeat. How do you propose to hold developers accountable for traffic and basic infrastructure? Garrett.
Absolutely. I think there's some advocacy work to be done here. There's, of course, impact fees, something we need to talk about and advocate at the state level, where developers should not outsource fees to residents when it comes to things like road improvements, schools. And so we need to do some advocacy work at the state level for sure. But I also want to talk about things about what we can do right here, right now. So absolutely, when a big development comes in, they are required to do a traffic impact analysis. I'd actually like to see these be expanded. So not only holding them accountable for traffic and the impact on traffic, but also things like, what is the impact on the environment? What is the impact on housing, the local economy? I call them community impact reports. I'd like developers to be accountable with every project to propose them publicly so that citizens and council members can respond to the full impact of a development project on a community. Now, also something that we see is that I'm calling it residential engagement groups, that during the actual construction of the development project, there's a breakdown in the communication. So When a development is proposed, we have public comment, public hearings, but then I've talked to too many residents that once a project begins, there's all these issues that they are experiencing, not just traffic, things like increased mosquito presence, stormwater runoff. They seem small, but they're quality of life issues. Noise, deterioration in air quality. So what I like to do is create a partnership with the town, the developer, and the residents around that to form an ad hoc group during the life of the project where we have that constant stream of communication so that residents aren't left to themselves to fend for the impact of a development.
Thank you. Sherry, how do you propose to hold developers accountable for traffic and basic infrastructure?
Singing my song, Tim. So, many of you may know that we are no longer allowed to charge impact fees to our developers. Impact fees that they would help to pay for infrastructure improvement that is now being burdened because of this development, or our water and stormwater. So to hold them accountable is one thing we're doing now. We often, and when I say often, at least once a week, pretty much, are meeting with new developers who want to build here in Holly Springs. And just for the record, we meet in twos, don't meet in threes. And this is at the point where the developer has come to the town, introduced themselves, presented them with a very generic plan. This is where we now can say to the developer when we meet with them, you know, beautiful plan, love it, but it's not going to work in this part of town. Or what are you going to do beyond what you have to do, beyond your road improvement in front of your site? What are you going to do to help our town? We're at a point now where we can be a little bit more choosy, you know, and so we are trying to encourage, if a developer really wants to develop here, encourage them, what can they do to help lessen the impact of on our infrastructure, on our community? What can they bring to our residents that will help them to be welcomed there? And it's working, but we've turned away a lot of developers lately because they're just not ready to bring that extra.
Thank you. Sean.
Thanks. Holding developers accountable seems like an interesting thing and something you might hear as a one-liner. We'd all love to ask the big guy, if you will, to pay more. So let's take that a little bit further. So what I learned throughout my career and the assignments that I had, looking at not only first order effect, but second order and third order effects of any decision that you make, is it's probably more important to look at the second and third order effect than what it sounds really good. It takes away that emotion. Here's the decision I'm going to make, and I'm going to make the developer pay that fee. Well, that fee, unfortunately, is probably going to get passed on to someone, and that someone is probably you. So your $300,000 house that we're talking about, affordable houses, is now going to go to $330,000 because the impact fee that the developer had to pay for that just gets passed on to the homeowner who's buying. So it's who do we want to pay? Do we want our new residents to pay more than the historic residents that have been here? It's a more nuanced discussion than that. So there are things that we can do beyond just looking at that impact fee, which I kind of call a red herring discussion. We do need to hold the developers accountable for that road frontage. So we have a large development such as Carolina Springs. Guess what? That's going to bring a bunch of road improvements just by the nature of that large community that they're bringing in. So that'll help. It helps with connectivity for utilities. And that was a question that I asked on our planning board about a year ago with one of the developments way down Avent Ferry or Castle Road, when they were looking at just doing wells on their own and didn't want to tie into public municipality utilities. They didn't want to pay to have that utility drain all the way out, the sewage pipes and everything else brought all the way out to them. And I asked the hard question of, well, what's the cost difference? The difference was not that much between them doing wells in their own leach fields versus bringing that there. But that's how I think we can hold developers accountable, is to bring them and entice them to bringing those utilities out to other areas as we continue to grow and expand in this town.
Thank you. Tom, how do you propose to hold developers accountable for traffic and basic infrastructure?
Well, let me tell you what the town does today and the existing council. And Councilwoman Sherry had mentioned we meet in pairs with builders. We can no longer hope spaghetti sticks on a wall and that these developments are being pushed down by the developers. We're not doing that anymore. I look at traffic analysis, make sure that that subdivision is able to support all the traffic as well as the traffic that's surround there. You'll see most recently, I didn't approve the Woods project. I didn't approve Honeycutt. I didn't think we were ready to handle that type of development there. So when developers come and ask and talk to us about building a project, I look at the whole picture. I look at the traffic that it's going to bring, the type of character of home that they're delivering, the type of product that they're going to bring. It's a different ballgame. You know, years ago, it was, well, we're coming, and, you know, we wanted them to come. Now, we're more strategic. Now we can say, you know what, we're not ready for you. Maybe 5 years down the road. But infrastructure is critical when, you know, 39,000, you've got to get from A to B. Right now, we're struggling, and that's what Councilman Sherry had said. There's stuff that we're turning down, especially if you look in that Suburban magazine, proposed, it's proposed. It's not approved. And there's a lot of concerns with some of those projects that are proposed from my perspective. And that's what we are changing how we do business in Holly Springs today. Thank you.
Thank you. Erin?
I love bringing up the anchor here. This is great. So first with impact fees, I just need to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. These are fees that are paid by the developers for the town to use on projects not necessarily associated with that project. So right now, the town can require road widening or medians or sidewalks. These can be used for infrastructure improvements on other parts of town. They can go into our schools. They are really for the community to use for the betterment of the entire community, not just around the new development. These are, as Sherry said, not legal. And towns can get in trouble for using them. I have wonderful relationships with our representatives from Holly Springs and our state senator here, and I am in constant contact with them. They know how I feel about this and know that I think it's something that we need to change. Now, I do disagree with Sean about whether this is going to affect housing affordability. I do not believe that developers are being benevolent and lowering their home prices to make them more affordable. They're charging market value. They're trying to get the most profit out of their community. If they're paying a development fee, they're not going to be able to charge above market value for that home. So what we're asking is the residents who are moving in to help split part of the cost of the infrastructure that they're going to be using with the residents who are already living here. Now, most of the development that's happening here is conditionally approved, meaning that there has to be some work by the council to give some exemptions to those developers. And when that happens, we need to be asking for more than we're asking now. You need to make that ask high so we're not negotiating against ourselves. And most of the time the developers will say no, but as Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Okay, but at least when we're in a better negotiating position, and if they don't want to play ball, then we can say, obviously you are not a partner in our community, and when you're ready to be a partner in the future of Holly Springs, you can come back to us and show us how you're going to better our community.
Thank you. One more. Stop at 7:15. Oh, 40. Okay. I couldn't remember. I was sitting here thinking, and it just wasn't working. Okay, our next question. What can or will you do to ensure Holly Springs does not have a continued tax rate hike? What can or will you do to ensure Holly Springs does not have a continued tax rate hike? Garrett, for some reason, you keep coming up first.
Let's do it.
Go get them.
Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. I just want to address one thing. A lot of proposals are put forward. Proposals, like Alan mentioned, to create a more happy, healthy, purposeful community. And there's often a scare tactic that's used. That all those sound great, but they're going to increase taxes. Because at the end of the day, if you always center discussion around people, You go to where you need to go. So when I think about this, I think about those individuals who are low income, fixed income, that feel those tax increases, that it becomes increasingly costly for them to live here. Because guess what? Healthcare costs are going up. Wages have not risen to the same degree as to meet housing and healthcare costs. And fixed incomes are just that, fixed. So I think about these individuals always center it based on people when decisions are made. So what do we need to do? I've offered a number of suggestions so far, partnering with nonprofits. So address affordability with large developments. We need to make sure that we can work with these large developments, particularly planned unit developments, to donate land that we can pass off to a nonprofit, where that nonprofit can keep rents or housing prices consistent over time, particularly for those on fixed income or low income. We need to partner with nonprofits like one specifically called Rebuilding Together the Triangle that specifically works with low-income and elderly residents to make home improvements to their homes so they can stay there. So by being creative, engaging with nonprofits, and engaging with others through public-private partnerships, we can make all these things happen. We don't need to limit the proposals we put forward at the end of the day because we want that healthy, purposeful community for our residents, and we need to be mindful of the second and third order effects on everyone when we make decisions.
Thank you. Erin?
I wish I had something new here. I think we've touched on a lot of it. We already talked about how our tax revenue base is a little skewed. So it's 83-17. It means that our residents are carrying an excessive burden of what we need to do in town. We can invest in growing our economic sector so that the businesses are carrying a larger share of that tax revenue, and then that won't necessitate us raising taxes on our residents year after year. Looking at impact fees, it's another source of revenue for our town, and as Garrett said, it's a lot of advocacy work, but that is one of the big roles of the council, is advocating for our citizens with our county, our state, and our federal government. Like we said before, demand more of developers so that when they're building these communities, part of that infrastructure is getting paid for by them instead of us. And the last thing I'd add is we need to look very carefully at the incentives that we're giving to larger businesses. A lot of times when these big employers come in, the incentive package might be the last thing they're looking at. They're looking at the quality of the community, they're looking at the quality of the site, they're looking at the supply chain in the surrounding area. The incentive packages are the gravy on top. But when we are giving tax abatements to large companies, we are reducing revenue into the town. So if we're going to continue doing that, we need to make sure that those companies are quality employers that are providing good health care to the employees they're bringing in, that they're bringing in high quality jobs so that the people who work there and live in our community have more money to spend in the small businesses that we're growing. If we're going to help these businesses, then once again, they need to give back to our community.
Thank you. What can or will you do to ensure Holly Springs does not have a continued tax rate hike? Tom?
We've had 2 bonds in the last 15 years, and for the record, I hate raising taxes. No one wants to pay extra money for stuff. Currently, our tax base is 83% residential, 17% commercial. We need to do a better job, and we are doing a better job with our economic development team to give opportunities for some of these large corporations that are looking at our business park as we speak today. That'll help alleviate any type of tax increase. If we go to the bond that was just recently approved by the residents, we can do one thing. We can do nothing, or we can do something. And in this situation, the bond was approved. Right now, our debt services, we have a lot coming off the books for the next 4 to 5 years. So I can't project that there's going to be a tax increase after 5 years. All I can assure you is we are fundamentally physically sound for the next 4 to 5 years. And again, I don't want to raise taxes. No one wants to pay more. But our infrastructure is critical. For our police and fire that have to get to you, your house, it's critical that we have these roads improved so that they can get to point A and point B, as well as residents here going from one end of town to the other. So, like I said, I think we're fundamentally fiscally sound for the next 4 to 5 years with a lot of the debt coming off. And that can't predict after that, but we're solid right now.
Thank you. Sherry?
Can I just say ditto, ditto? No, it sounds like this is something we are really all on the same page on, is one of the main things for me is that 70-30% of residential and commercial. And one way to get there is to entice these businesses to come out here. With Securus and Rovisus out in our business park, seems to be that biotech bio-farm is something that likes to take a look at Holly Springs. One of the things we need to do, and it does cost a little bit of money up front, is be site ready. Site ready can mean something as like getting electricity and water out there to certain sites, to helping with land acquisition. Those are things that if we can get ahead of, take care of those things and be ready for these businesses to come to town, will be more enticing. The other thing to help get to that business, the residential business percentage, is making sure we have an incredible employment pool. I mean, we all know we're great here. We know we have that pool here. We want businesses to be able to look at us and say they have a healthy parks and recreation area. They have the amenities that help to bring in a healthy and vibrant family, people, and that helps with the employment pool. And then the other thing is to work on our, as we talked about, the incentives differentials, and to help make it so that businesses are able to come here, big or small. They can't always be treated equal, but to be treated fairly.
Thank you. Sean?
Bad and cleanup. So, from this perspective, I'm very happy that I've had the opportunity to engage on the planning board in the community and try and already help to make a difference there. And how I'll couch that is Carolina Springs. I actually got to spend my first year on the planning board as just a member of the planning board and a member of the technical review committee. And on the technical review committee, we had Shenandoah Development come through and talk to us about what they had planned for what now is called the Carolina Springs Plan Unit Development. At that time, there was a lot of back and forth discussion between us on that technical review committee, which is a grouping of town staff, council members, and some folks from the planning board. Over that process, and being involved in that process over those 2 years, we continue to make sure that the developer knew that we needed to see a 70-30 split between commercial and residential. And every time they'd come back and go, well, we know just a little more residential, we went, no, it's time for you to make sure we hold true to this 70-30. And we did, and that's what got passed and approved here for that plan unit development as of a couple months ago. So happy to be part of that conversation. We also looked at the southern area planning a year ago, and I voiced some concern about that. And from this perspective, we took away some of those core growth areas in the southern area to make it mostly residential with a major concern for traffic and the traffic that comes forward. But again, in the long run, we need that tax basis in that southern area so that we can partner with folks like NCDOT for that southern bypass that I talked about, the NC51 coastal bypass, because sitting on the Campos Suas transportation study for the last year, they made it very clear that there's no tax basis and there's no incentive for them to partner with us in that unless there is commercial and residential development down in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. What characteristic of yours makes you the most capable to represent the interests of the citizens of Holly Springs? So what characteristic of yours makes you the most capable to represent the interests of the citizens of Holly Springs? Sherry.
Ooh, let's see. You know, it's funny. I think back to when I first started on the council, and I can honestly say I think the characteristic has changed quite a bit. Now I feel that the characteristic that makes me most suited for this is that I know so many people in town. There's a lot I still need to meet, but I like to think I'm in a little part of everything. The schools, our sports, Parks and Rec, our businesses. I'm also very accessible. Even being in the middle of soccer, in the middle of the grocery store, I'll always be happy to stop and help you. If it's something I can't answer right then, I will. I always can find someone to get to you. But I think one of my best traits on the council right now is the ability to change, to adapt, and to work well. I do play well with others. I don't always have to agree, but I respect. I learn, and I have a willingness and a determination to make sure that everything that I do, along with my fellow council members, is for the best interest of the community.
Thank you. What characteristic of yours makes you the most capable to represent the interests of the citizens of Holly Springs? And before I call your name, if anyone else needs to leave, wait until I repeat the question, and then we'll let you go out. Okay? Does that sound fair? Thank you. Let's go with Garrett.
Okay, so I was a former elementary school teacher, taught kindergarten, third grade, before going back to get my MBA with a focus on nonprofit management and being a data analyst for nonprofits. So one thing I've learned throughout this whole that whole journey was the need to be proactive and engage people, and just advocate for the needs of your students and others. So at my core, that proactivity, that engagement of people, I believe town council members should be fierce advocates for their communities. So what does that look like? Up to this point in the campaign, I've personally knocked on 2,500 doors. I have canvassed for 35 days. What I intend to bring to this town council is someone who will continue canvassing beyond election day. I believe that when there are big decisions, big plans that are in the works, it's not enough to wait and see who comes to you, whether it be online or in a town council meeting or a public hearing. What I commit to doing is going into communities, those communities that will be directly affected by decisions, and canvassing those communities, knocking on doors to get input on those decisions. I also will plan on continuing to have open door office hours at small businesses for those face-to-face interactions. I think technology is great, but it's never going to replace that face-to-face interaction that people have, and that's something I am committed to. Another thing is I like to ensure that I always turn myself to the people and leverage the power of the community. So one thing that I've done is I started a petition about the landfill that now has the signatures of 350 residents asking for real change. It's something that I have embraced as someone who likes to organize and uplift voices from the community. I will always go into the community and raise their voices and put pressure on others to make meaningful change to improve the lives of those around them.
Thank you. Sean?
Thanks. So that one characteristic, I think, is a passion for serving. So as I mentioned earlier, I served our nation for 25 years. I jumped right in here after we got here and started serving our community, bringing our neighbors together for a neighborhood project because we thought our greenway system was going to disappear because of NC 540. And that's what got me engaged in the town. But it was bringing people together. It was talking to people and understanding what their needs were and how to serve others that finds me here where I am today, that got me engaged in the town and keeps me motivated to continue to serve other people. That didn't come by happenstance. Over the years, I learned to collect ideas from other people. Starting off as a pilot, I thought I was going to be a pilot, and then I went to be a maintenance officer, and I had to work with a bunch of young enlisted airmen fixing airplanes. And I learned very quickly that I didn't have the ideas, that other people had the best ideas of how to move us forward in many cases. But I could bring those ideas together and come up with a good solution to move us forward. And so I think I've been able to continue that here in this environment, in this community. You have to do things like leadership by walking around. And I mean by walking around, not by being walked around. So you see a lot of leaders that follow people around to the places that people want to show them. But it takes going to those places that other people don't go to try and get some of those opinions so that you can understand the broader problem at hand, not just for one group, but for lots of groups in that community. And I've tried to do that throughout my career, and I've tried to do that here as well, whether we deliberate something on the planning board, much as we did for 3.5 hours last night. It was a long board meeting last night. But those 9 volunteer members sit there and we do the research and we do the deliberation, because those are decisions, our recommendations going forward to the council are going to impact the citizens one way or the other when that decision is made. So I believe it's that passion for service that is the characteristic for me.
Thank you. Erin?
Well, I'll tell you the characteristic I like most about myself is I think I'm a pretty darn good dad. I think that everybody up here would say that being a parent gives you a perspective that you didn't have before the moment you became one. It gives you a broader view beyond yourself and lets you know that the things you're fighting for are not about you. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because I would do anything for my kids, including run for office, to make sure that the only home that they will ever remember is the best possible home that it could be. I've mentioned also that I'm a small business owner, so I'm used to having to find creative solutions to complex problems, to work within a narrow budget, and to make sure every investment that I'm making is getting the best return I possibly can. And then as a veterinarian, I make my decisions based on data, based on research, making sure they're well reasoned. When I'm injecting a clear fluid into a vein, I need to know every single thing about that injection. So when I'm making a decision, I need to know the possible outcomes, the possible pitfalls, and what is the most likely thing that's going to happen, because that decision is going to fall on me and me alone. And then the last thing I'll say is that as somebody who has been an advocate, who has talked to people in multiple levels of government, who has organized in the community, it's been a real privilege for me to develop the relationships I've developed, not only across different levels of government, but in a wide and diverse variety of communities. Because those are two ends of the spectrum. You need to be able to understand where everybody's coming from, and then you need to have those relationships to take those concerns, needs, and wishes to the right people so that you can get the best outcome for them.
Thank you. Time. One more. I'm going to cheat just a little bit. I'm going to try to find one that's on a little bit different topic.
Tom didn't
Oh,
get the
Tom,
answer.
I forgot Tom. It was Pete last time. This time it's you. You remember?
He's like, I
Yeah.
thought I go last.
Yeah,
I love you, man.
so that's okay. A lot of people know my work ethic that I bring to the table, to the town of Holly Springs. I serve you. I am your voice. My wife and my kids, they don't see me every night because they know I'm either at a town council meeting, a Parks and Rec meeting, or meeting with the residents about concerns and issues that they may have about speeding or garbage that's coming out. So my work ethic that I bring to the table is to be your voice. When I have to go downtown Raleigh to meet with our legislators on certain bills that impact Holly Springs, that is my responsibility to be your voice. And this is work. It's like a full-time job. My phone was ringing at 8 o'clock last night. A resident had a question about backflow. I'm going to take that call. I may not have the answer, but I'll get the answer. So I work for you. I represent your voice. I've done that for the last 3+ years, and I'd like to do that for the next 4 years. My leadership, my work ethic, my accountability is what I bring to the table. It's all about you. Not me. It's all about you. We live in a fantastic town. It is a special place. That's why we're not moving. My wife's like, Tom, we'll move to Florida or something. We've moved 3 times in Sunset Ridge. 3! Isn't that crazy? Because we love the community. And that's what I brought for the last 14 years. A coach, a leader, and I love it because I love this community. Thank you.
Thank you. One question is almost identical to one we had earlier. So I'm going to read you the 3 questions that are left. Then I'm going to combine the questions into one. Okay? So one question is, Holly Springs has a great balance of growth and small town amenities. How do you maintain that balance? The other one says a lot of progress has been made on responsible growth in the last 18 months. So what specific policies will you propose to keep the momentum moving responsibly? And the third one says, how will you ensure you will represent all the constituents in Holly Springs equally? So here's how I'm going to pose the question. We've had a great balance of growth in that small town field, especially in our amenities. And a lot of progress has been made in the last 18 months on responsible growth. How do we maintain that balance? How do we maintain the momentum? And how will you make sure that in doing this, you are representing every citizen in Holly Springs? That's the only time I'm going to ask the question. I can't do it twice, so you got to remember. So we will begin this with Erin.
So we have a really unique opportunity, or I should say the next council is going to have a really unique opportunity. We are going to have a new land use plan, and the second part of that land use plan is going to be revising all of our UDOs, which are going to guide development. And as the wonderful consultants have said over and over again, that these are character-based instead of density-based. So we're going to be changing the way that we judge new communities. And that gives us a really awesome opportunity to grow in a way that preserves the best thing about Holly Springs, which is our sense of community. One of the things that the consultants talked about was developing more mixed-use communities so people can work and live and shop and have space to play with their kids all within walking distance. If we plan it right, we can connect those communities with sidewalks and greenways so that people can get around in ways other than cars. If we want people to drive less and reduce traffic, we need to make other modes of transportation safe and convenient and accessible to all those communities. Now, we also have to recognize that as we do this, there might be some people who are on the losing end. And those are the people that oftentimes we don't hear from. Talking about canvassing like Garrett was, I was at a woman's house who's 80 years old and was undergoing dialysis, and she could barely lift her head to talk to me when I knocked on her door, but when I got to talking to her, she was incredibly passionate about voting. She had voted in every election since she was able to, and she'd been in Holly Springs for 82 years. She didn't have a car, but she assured me that somebody was going to drive her to the polls. And if I hadn't knocked on her door, nobody would have heard her concerns, nobody would have heard her stories of the town. So as we're continuing to grow, we need to, like Garrett said, meet people where they are instead of waiting for them to come to us to make sure that our development is equitable and inclusive.
Thank you. Sean.
So I think a positive part of what has just gone on with the town is RE Vision Holly Springs. So being part of that process and watching our citizens engage in that process, whether it was the initial push of that to get things out to actually all the way towards the finality of that plan being presented and being able to sit there in a joint planning board, town council meeting with our citizens advisory committee and look at the input that was made from not only them but other citizens as to how we move forward in this community. It's encouraging to see that people are being engaged, but we have to engage people in those meaningful manners to make sure that we continue to grow and get things that we want amenity-wise for our community as we move forward. One of those amenities that some people look for in that new vision of Holly Springs is an aquatic center, a fitness center. I see yet another opportunity for us to partner. We have 2 major medical facilities coming in, a hospital, another major medical facility in Duke, and we have a lot of veterans in this area that need medical service. Well, guess what? Those medical facilities need a rehab center, which is called an aquatic or a fitness center. So there's a way we can continue to move forward, build our infrastructure as a win-win with a private-public partnership to continue those great amenities that we have in this town. And then we need to figure out how to connect so that our outlying island communities, as I've called them, and I know Garrett used that earlier, but I've been calling them that for the last 3 years on the planning board, is how do we get those people back into that center area? So Park and Recs is looking at a new long-term plan here in shortly as well. So we need to figure out how to get those pathways in, look at ways for folks to come in on a bike, walk in, to get to all those amenities via that Park and Rec system. Thanks.
Garrett.
So I've talked about public transportation, affordability, small business growth. I'm going to focus on the environment as my theme for this answer. So we made some progress with the recent tree ordinance, offering increased tree protections. I would like to see it go a little further and have increased accountability for developers who kind of shirk their duties. And so here's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see something like an environmental review board, something that's going on in Apex right now, where essentially it would be a board like the planning board that would make decisions or offer recommendations to the town council solely on the impact that development might have to the environment, to air quality, water quality, because this issue is far more than just about aesthetics in town. When we think about trees, we think about stormwater management, their air purifiers, shade protection, balanced ecosystems, and erosion control. So we need to think about the economic and health benefit of green space and tree preservation as well. So the Environmental Review Board is, I think, something that where we can get really serious about projects and making serious recommendations to the council about environmental impacts. Another thing we can do is I'm really actually increasingly concerned with not only air quality, but water quality as well. We see down in Pittsburgh, if those are followed the news, the increased presence of synthetic chemicals called PFAS, they're like the chemicals used in Teflon, appearing in waterways, so to the extent where Duke University is now conducting studies of residents. So what I'd like to do is further empower our water quality division to test for some of these unregulated chemicals that are increasingly being present within our waterways. So ultimately, we need to go where people are most affected by this. We need to go where people are affected in terms of air quality, those around the landfill. We need to go where those who are most affected by deforestation, next to big development projects and air quality. So we need to go where people are. We need to and fiercely advocate for their needs and their environmental protection.
Tom?
Our town council recently put together a strategic plan and a vision, and I want to read this. Our vision is unmatched quality of life, family-friendly community that residents and businesses call home. You know, we're ranked one of the top 5 places to raise a family. We're one of the safest in the country, one of the top. We're one of the best towns to live in. And I talk about before about being more strategic and balanced. When we talk about Wake, partnering with Wake Transit, eventually we're going to have bus shuttles from Holly Springs to Apex to RTP. This will give an opportunity for residents that don't necessarily have to jump in their cars and, you know, take up all that space on 540. That's another thing. 540 is expanding through Holly Springs. That's going to give access for those residents to get to RTP as an example. Again, I talked about, we can't throw spaghetti on the wall. We've got to look at every little thing. And it's not for today, but it's for that 5, 10, 20-year plan. And that's what we have with our land use plan, and that's going to be in the process of potential being approved in the very short term. So the status of our town in terms of businesses and growth, I don't want to be swallowed up. I want to make sure that we've got the infrastructure to get from point A to B. I'm very, sorry.
Thank you. Sherry?
All righty. Well, in the last couple of years, we've made a lot of the big changes to meet our new dynamic. And it's really important that we continue moving forward with that. As candidate Erin mentioned, a rewriting of our UDOs now that to match our land use vision, to match our strategic plan. That is going to be huge. There are so many changes that can happen in those UDOs that will affect our everyday lives. Some of the things that I think can help, especially when want to make sure we're reaching out to everybody, is the engagement, encouraging people to be more engaged, encouraging people to engage their neighbors, and for us to reach out more. Not just the council, but also the town, the staff. Offering things like the mixed residential, mixed use, can bring to us the opportunity for workforce housing. We are even now saying to developers, hey, you want to build 500 homes, can we do 60 of them as a workforce housing and affordable housing? We have to be careful with the age. We can't say, can we be 55 or 65 and older? We have to be very careful with that now. But most importantly, we need to work as a team. I know I can't get out to 2,500 homes but if we work as a team, we can get to everybody. And I think that's what we need to continue to do going forward, is working as that team.
Thank you. Okay, and for your closing statement, you'll each be given 1 minute.
2.
Huh? Is it 2? It was 2?
Yeah.
Oh, I must be getting tired.
I'm about to talk really fast.
2 minutes. All right. So, wait a minute. Let me kind of shuffle these cards here and see who's going to come up first. It'll be this one. Garrett, you get to come up first a lot tonight.
Dang. Why not? Let's do this.
2 minutes.
Thank you to our hosts, those here tonight, and those who couldn't make here but still deeply care about Holly Springs. At the start of this evening, I centered my discussion around people. I've committed to running for office the same way I would lead with as a council member. I spent 35 days canvassing and personally knocked on 2,500 doors. Here's the proof. I've done this because I believe engaging the community at the grassroots level. Others will tell you what isn't possible, what can't be done. I'm here tonight to describe a new vision, an expanded view of what we can do and should do for the people of this community. Here's some of the work I've done. With regard to the landfill, for too long I saw the same response offered by elected officials when residents voiced concerns. Wanting to put pressure on others to produce meaningful change, I started a petition that has the signatures of over 350 residents and presented this petition to the county commissioners and town council. Thanks to advocates within our community, we finally see some movement on this issue. By canvassing communities, I've been able to map out hotspots for speeding. I then contacted businesses to see if we could offer anti-speeding safety signs at wholesale prices, specifically targeting those hotspots. As residents were being displaced by the 540 extension, I canvassed neighborhoods to make sure they had legal counsel. To advocate for better air quality, I reached out to the NCDOT to discuss ways in which pollution around work sites can be mitigated. I secured commitments from the business community to help fund and volunteer with local nonprofits, specifically those working to keep low-income and elderly residents in their homes. I've contacted grocery co-ops, asking about the process for attracting them to town. I filed an application to a nonprofit that helps eliminate medical debt, hoping that they will help relieve cost-burdened Holly Springs residents from their debt. If elected, I'll continue to canvass neighborhoods and proactively address the issues affecting residents. As a former elementary school teacher, data analyst, MBA graduate with a focus in nonprofit management, and director of continuous improvement, I have the skill and passion to do this job. Thanks for your time, and most importantly, thank you for your commitment to a happy, healthy, purposeful community.
Thank you. Sean.
Thank you. Tonight, I conclude with this challenge. Thanks to the chamber, you've learned a lot, and maybe just a little here about us, so please take the opportunity to re-engage us and don't pass on the opportunity to vote November 5th. Life is about choices. You do have a choice. I hope you listen to my approach to our town's challenges. That, coupled with my previous experiences leading people and organizations in no-fail environments, along with my active engagement in our community, should make your choice an easy one. Elections and politics are very new to me. What isn't new is serving others by partnering people and ideas for success. I spent half of my life serving our nation to defend our freedoms. That freedom is never free. Nothing in life ever is. Civic leaders should be held accountable for decisions using other people's money, your money. It isn't an easy one-liner of sticking the bill to someone else. That cost ultimately will be passed on to someone else, like you, the homeowner and the taxpayer. Speaking of other money, I am only accepting donations from local individuals. No PACs, no organizations, no other crowdsourced funding from outside the local area. Holly Springs is truly at a bend in the road. We have many amenities any small town hopes for. Soon we'll add Lowe's, Wegmans, a hospital, completed town hall commons to add to your local options. Even though local recreation areas are in close proximity, some neighborhoods do not have or yet to have to be connected by sidewalks or greenways. The decisions we make at this bend will impact you and your family. I will continue to advocate and engage on your behalf for infrastructure growth that focuses our efforts on leveraging partnerships. So choice made, I promise, as one of your council members, to continue a proven record of accountable decision-making, researching the facts, seeking diverse thoughts, but always placing my vote where the solution intersects with a fiscally realistic and sustainable approach for you, the community of Holly Springs. This is everyone's home. We all want a safe place to live, work, shop, and play. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Erin.
Once again, thank you to the Chamber for hosting. Thank you, Tim. You've done a great job, and I love the iPad. It's been very helpful. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I think probably the question I get asked most every day, and I would wager everybody gets this question, is why are you running? And it is an incredibly difficult question to answer. Not because we don't know. The problem is I would wager we all have so many reasons. And the problem is figuring out which one is most important to us. So I've thought a lot about that. And what I've realized is, for me, I grew up in the suburbs of Northern Virginia, went to Virginia Tech for 8 years, received my veterinary degree. Got a Hokie back there? All right. And I met my wife there, my future wife. We moved back to my hometown to start our family, being near my family. We bought a home, had our daughter. I was working at the hospital that I worked in as a child. Not a child, that would be illegal. As a teenager. And then we got pregnant with our second child, my son. And all of a sudden, things started to feel very small. Our home was too small. Our paychecks were too small. The possibility of giving our kids the future we wanted to give them was too small. So my wife and I made this really scary, bold decision to move our entire family, including my parents, to a new state and a new home. And out of everywhere, we picked Holly Springs. And it has been the best decision that we ever made. And I see in Holly Springs a lot of the stuff that I saw in my hometown, and I want to prevent it from becoming my hometown. I want to create a town that is affordable, inclusive, diverse, and accessible so that when my kids go off to college, hopefully a state school, or whatever they want to do, and come back to start a family of their own, Holly Springs will be open and available to them. This is the only home that they are going to remember. And this is the forever home for me and my family. So the question is, who do you trust to make the best decisions for you and your family? You can't make a wrong choice. I think everybody up here has shown how much they care and love this town. So I would appreciate your vote. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you. Tom?
Thank you all for being here this evening. I do appreciate that. Karen Shore asked me a question not too long ago. What does a councilman do? And I said, I attend town council meetings, and we look for the best interests of the town of Holly Springs. I also attend workshops. I also talk to residents on the phone and email and meet with them when they have issues. I attend HOA meetings to provide information on what's going on around town and receive feedback from how can we improve. I also go down to our legislators, and I talked about that briefly, representing you. There was a bill not too long ago where they wanted to spray chemicals on the dump. That bill would allow the county to spray chemicals, and they didn't have the data at that time to prove that it was safe. So I went down to our legislators to represent your voice, and explained our concerns. That bill got squashed. Didn't happen. Not because of me. There was definitely a lot of people, but as your representative, that's what I did. Most recently with the landfill, we had a meeting just recently this past week downtown with the county commissioners. They finally understand that we have an issue with the dump. Again, it's my responsibility to be your voice. We have a fantastic police and fire department. We have a fantastic downtown, a destination. We have a hospital that's coming. I ask for your vote on November the 5th to continue the hard work that I have done for the last 3+ years. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you. Sherry?
All righty. I apologize if I read a little bit. It's been a long day. All righty. People have asked me, I still have fight in me after 8 years being on the council. And I think Steve Jobs said it best. He said, if you're working on something exciting that you really care about, you don't need to be pushed. The vision pulls you. Pride in our differences and compassion for our community and respect for where we've been, hope for where we're going, are some of the priorities that fuel my fire and really help me to get that strength, that motivation, that sometimes, as a council person, can be hard to do. Decisions that the council makes have a profound impact on the lives and livelihood of thousands of people, and thousands and thousands. I am promised to encourage the sensible development of our town into the future while meeting the needs of today. But I need you all to do something for me. You're all here for a reason. You're all here because you care about our town. You care about your families. You care about the issues that were discussed tonight, and I'm sure many more. But we need you to get out there and do your part. We need you to stay engaged. We need you to talk to us, let us hear your voice. Most importantly, we need you to get out there and vote. One of the things, as I just stated in the last question, that's really important is we need people to work as a team. We need people who are going to work together. We have some very caring people up here who I know will work well as a team. But I hope to use my experience, my adaptability, and my love for Holly Springs and our children and their children to keep moving forward. Thank you so much.